Hello, everyone, and welcome to those of you who are in the room and those of you who are joining us online. I'm Fiona Bradley. I'm the director of Fruitmarket, and I'm the curator of this show. And this is Ibrahim Mahama. We're here to talk about this extraordinary show, but also to launch this beautiful book. It'd be hard to have come here and not realize that we're launching a book, because it's everywhere. We're so proud of it. This publication designed by Elizabeth McLean, with contributions from Abigail Duparc and Godelieve Kazangati Kabena, who's here with us this evening. And we're so proud of it and grateful to the contributors and thankful to Elizabeth for working with Ibrahim to make this really extraordinary book. I want to thank them. I also want to thank the Henry Moore Foundation and Ibrahim's galleries, White Cube and Appalazzo Gallery, and also big thanks to the Ibrahim Mahama Supporters Circle, some of whom are with us this evening. None of this is possible without the support of talented people who've made the book and generous people who've helped us make the show. Ibrahim and I are going to talk for about 45 minutes, and there will be time for questions from people in the room and also online. If you have a question online, Ruth, our interpretation curator, is staffing the online portal. So do put any questions in the chat or in the questions box, wherever you put it, Ruth will find it, and we'll ask it on your behalf in the room. And then at the end of the talk and the end of the questions, we'll head downstairs, and Ibrahim has kindly agreed to sign copies of the book. So if any of you would like to buy the book, special price, bargain, and I'll push it again at the end, so don't worry, then please do, and you can have another chat with Ibrahim and a chance to get your book signed. But Ibrahim, it's wonderful to have you back here. We've been living this show. We've been living with this show since July, and we've been seeing people loving it and getting things out of it that I don't think we put in, or I don't think we expected people to get out of it, and that's why it's so lovely to see so many people here this evening. But I want to start with a big question, if that's okay. What's it for? What's it all for, this art stuff? Why do we do it? What is art for? Ibrahim and I have been talking a lot, so I know you can do this. I just, we're here, we've been brought together because of this. Why do we do it? What can art do for us?
Well, first and foremost, thank you very much, every one of you, for coming. I'd like to thank Elizabeth especially for picking me up from the airport yesterday. She brought a copy of the book, so I'd already seen it online, but seeing it in flesh was quite gratifying. And a lot of work has gone into this. And as you rightfully put, there's always a question about why we make art to begin with. And I'm fortunate. Godelieve and I, we trained at the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. It's a school that was originally established by the British. We had this College of Arts, the arts program, which was quite very conservative for many years until almost 2 decades ago. We had a professor of ours, Dr. Caricature, who started this emancipatory arts teachings. The idea that art could go beyond this point of a commodity. So not just thinking about art from a Western point of view or context, but thinking about art as a gift, as precarious as it is. Because you have to realize that back where we come from, we don't have established institutions as you don't have here in the West. We don't have grants, we don't have access to all the things that probably would create an ecosystem. But at the same time, it also means that when you're at that point of ground zero, it means that it teaches you otherwise to be resourceful and to find other points of connection. So for us, the point has always been about the question of justice and also about freedom. Even in the most difficult context or situation, can we still be able to produce something called art? I don't really like calling it art, because art has all these different points. And at what point does art really happen? Is it really when it's a painting on a wall? Or is it when it's about exhumation or creating something new or resurrections or in the art market? There are different strands to it. So the point is always to establish a question that would lead us on.
So that, yeah, it seems, I mean, it's why I make shows. It's why we do this, to find stuff out,
Yeah.
essentially,
Yes.
and to make a difference.
Mhm.
And when did you know you wanted to be an artist, that making art was possible?
I had a very peculiar childhood because I grew up in boarding school. I was 5 when I was sent to a boarding school. So I had to learn to be independent quite very early. Imagine at the age of 5, waking up at 4:30 in the morning to go and fetch water to bathe and things like that. And I used to hate being in a boarding school, so I used to draw a lot. It really kept me company. And interestingly enough, when I was, I think, 9 years old, our school took us on a trip to the art center. We have these art centers around Ghana where they sell crafts for tourists. And they have this theater drama group. They had invited a secondary school for a play. There's this school in Ghana. It's a very good one. It's called Presbyterian Boys. They have a really good drama group. And they did a play which I went to see. And it was so inspiring as a 9-year-old when I saw it. When I came back to school, I immediately joined the drama group because I liked this accent thing that I had seen. And it became an interest. I used to perform on stage. And up until university even, I used to be part of the drama group. But before that, even like when I was going to secondary school, my father said, "Oh, you like drawing quite a lot. Even when you're last in all the subjects, you're always first in drawing. So why not,
So you had that encouragement from your father?
Yeah, I
from your
did. I
parents?
did. My father studied architecture and planning at the university. Yeah, so he used to work for the government until he established his company, construction company. Yeah, but I come from a very large family. So my father has many wives and children. So all my other siblings were all older. Mm-hmm. So certainly there was already an establishment of my brother's a doctor, the others are engineers.
They'd done that, so you
They'd
were
done
allowed
that
to be an
already,
artist.
so there was no pressure to succeed in the family. So my father said, "Why not? Let's see." And then when I went to art school, of course, it was very traditional, like the arts program in high school. I did picture making and sculpture, but normally you can do ceramics, textiles, or whatever. And the teacher who was teaching me in high school, he was a friend to my mentor later, caricature.
Oh, wow.
Even caricature was at his wedding, when they were young men, when they're young, yeah. So later so he was the one that encouraged us, or when you go to the university, because we had 2 options, either to do, a couple of options, to do architecture, or to do painting and sculpture as a fine arts program, or to do industrial art. And then I chose to do fine art. So when I went to the fine arts program and I met caricature and then the group, that's when I realized, indeed, you could actually, because at the time there was no relationship between architecture and then fine arts. Mm-hmm. When the system in Ghana, it's not as if you would go for an interview. They would, if you apply for a program and you don't meet the grades, they will put you in a different program.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so a lot of the guys I was in class with, they didn't want to be artists. They applied for different courses, but just because they didn't meet the grades, they ended up. But I chose the fine arts program because I thought there was something about it. And once I met caricature and then conversations, the teachings with the other professors, because at the time they were beginning to remodel the program. And then everything fell into place.
That's so interesting when you talk about the importance of when you're a very small child of drawing. I was going to ask you if you could talk to us a little bit about how you live and work now. And it's so interesting to me that how one of the ways in which you live and work now is surrounded by children who you inspire with your work. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've set up in Ghana and how your working life has unfolded? I think our vision of this solitary solo fine artist, I mean, Godlieve talks beautifully about this in the book, but the way in which you work is so particular.
Yeah, for us, we thought that it was necessary, So the city where my studio is in is called Tamale. It's in the very north, not very, very north, but it's in the north of Ghana. And historically, it's always been very deprived, like the north of England. There's a lot of iron ore in the earth. So historically, people used to produce bows and arrows and everyday materials, objects out of it. And during the period of slavery, there were a lot of slaves who were taken from that region through the coast to the Americas. And then post-slavery era, still, there were a lot of people who came from there to work for the British in the Gold Coast to build the railways and also to work in the mines, work in the cola fields, the cocoa plantations and all that. And I was born there in '87. My father was born in Accra in the '40s. His father had walked from Tamale, which was about 600 and something kilometers all the way to Accra to work in the early 20th century. And yeah, the question was that I didn't grow up in Tamale, but the question was that would I be willing to go back? Because in art school, caricature had always insisted that as an artist, it's your role to somehow produce a practice that can somehow change the course of history within the community that you find yourself in. Not necessarily just producing beautiful objects or making paintings, things like that. So he and I had this conversation when I was doing undergrad and also like my MFA mostly. And then I decided to build a studio up north because he said, imagine just the idea of building a studio in a village, it could even change the perception of even one child. That could go a long way to change the world. And I said, sure, let's see. So once I started building the studio, I quickly came to realize that because of the deficit, because there were no cultural institutions or anything like that, no public spaces. The closest to a public space you can get is to take your child to a KFC or something like that. So I said, okay, fine, let's build a studio. Children will come to the studio and then we can do workshops and things like that with them. But certainly once it started growing, we began to realize that people would bring their children, even doctors, engineers, because they quickly saw that art was a lot more than something that was just an object. But also, for me, I think that it's important to make art and then to include children in them because it's also about legacy, you know. And historically, a lot of artists from the continent who've made work. Even there is a really beautiful show by El Anatri at the Rice Gallery. And El left Ghana in the 60s. He went to, I think, late 60s. He went to teach in Nigeria. At the time, Nigeria was blossoming. There was a very core group of intellectuals in Nsukka who really helped him. Also, as much as he went there with an intellectual force, but I think it was also a very good nurturing time for his own practice. And Ghana didn't have much of that. Though now it's somehow turned around that in Ghana, we have a young generation of strong intellectuals, artists, like some of our colleagues like Bernard, Kwesi, and others who've been very strong within the community and all that. But it was very important in that regard. So for me, I thought that it was quite interesting to somehow build a space, because when you build a studio, it's not an institution necessarily, because a studio is a place where things happen. So an artist, for instance, we're making drawings or we're building the studio, unlike when a modern art institution is being established, everything is done and then we fill it with objects. The idea is that the studio is supposed to be an open process. So if we invite students to come to the studio, they see the studio as it works. So when we were making all these drawings and works, the kids would come around in the studio and they would see us making the drawings and we'll discuss the drawings. They will look at the process, we'll discuss it as it's going. It wasn't something that was supposed to be done in secrecy or whatever, because the artist always said, I need a space to produce. I'm like, we've never had that before. So now that we are beginning to see the potentials and the promise, we have to be able to share it with young people. Yeah.
So, one of the things, as you know, that I find most interesting in working with you is essentially a lot of the time we're doing the same thing.
Yes.
We run an organization that's open every day for free and has a very young audience, and we're here because we do it because we understand that art can inspire people, can change the world, and you change the world one person at a time when you do it like that. But it was lovely for us when we were installing this show and began to install this show, and there were lots of people around, and I'm so sorry, it's hard for you to think because there's so many people around, and you and your studio manager what do you mean? We usually have 500 kids watching us doing everything. This is really peaceful. So it's a sort of nice moment that it is this open situation that you're in, I think is really incredible. But seeing as we have this opportunity, we have you here, we're sitting here surrounded by this wonderful work. I wanted to ask you some general questions and we'll get to the specifics. And of course, what I want to start with is the materials that you work with. I think for me, one of the first joys of your work is that it works on a level of material affect first. You stand in front of one of your works and it's doing something to you, and it's getting to you, and then it's maybe only later that you begin to think about what its political meaning is or other kinds of meaning. And I want to talk a little bit about your choice of materials and what it is that gets you about a material and makes you think, right, you're coming with me, you're coming into my artwork.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's the life within materials, because most often in the world, when things are old, we think that they're just meant to be discarded. There's an African proverb that says that when an old man dies, a woman dies, they die, an entire library has burnt down, you know. So it's the same with objects, because Ella Natri, when we were in school and were studying his work, he always, in his interviews, he always insisted on the point that each time we touch an object, we leave a charge on the object. You know, and the bottle caps and all these other objects that he himself has worked with acknowledges that they embody memory and all that. And certainly, I've always also believed that it was a very good point of inspiration. So certainly, when I look at an object which has a scar or something, I'm very excited about it. When something is new, yeah, it's almost as if it's devoid of life. It's supposed to be the other way around. It's new, but it's new when you're using an object and it's working. You don't really reflect upon it until it breaks down. Yeah, when you're on a plane and the pilot says, we have to replace a part, suddenly you want to Google it and what does this part do that has held us here? But before that, you really don't care about it. Yeah. And that's what age does to an object, you know? And so I began by collecting the jute sacks, which is produced from India, Bangladesh, brought to Ghana for exportation of cocoa beans. And then, of course, originally the railway was built in the Gold Coast for extraction of cocoa, gold, and others. So already, that history was there. And when I used the jute sacks and other materials to a point where I was also interested in collecting other materials like the trains and others in Ghana, people would say, oh, but why would you be interested in a train? What would you do with a train anyway? Because in Ghana, they're cutting all the trains into scraps. But I said, yeah, why not? Because these objects are embedded with so much history. Each time a train goes on a line, it registers a mark on it. It's like the hard drive. Each time, the old hard drives, when it registers, it leaves all these traces of information. And I thought those informations were somehow very important. And especially in the context of these leather forms, they are the floors of the old trains and carriages that were brought from the Eastern Bloc, specifically from the GDR in the early 90s. And they were used as second-class coaches. So at some point, because the original rail line was in the Gold Coast, towards the sea, rust and other things when they were abandoned.
Because it was built for, just recapitulate, exactly. It was built for the transportation of gold, yes, right, around the Gold Coast.
Yes.
It wasn't built for the transportation of people.
No. But certainly, towards during the structural adjustment program, Ghana had a lot of money, loans from the IMF and World Bank, which was used in the purchasing of trains and others. And a lot of those trains were used for passenger transport and along the coast. And these trains, these leather forms come from that. So a lot of these trains were being cut into pieces. And then I had to negotiate with the scrap dealers because the state would not sell them to me directly. So I would negotiate with the scrap dealers and buy it from them. So when I bought it from them, it's now the problem was how to get them from the coast all the way to the north. So of course we were able to solve that problem easily. But then once it arrived, I was more interested in the train as a vessel, one that we could use, because in the studio we are transforming them into classrooms, into living spaces, into studios and all kinds of things. But the inside floor, which was decaying, the question was that what do you do with this element of decay? One might remove it and throw it away. But I also thought that there was something very beautiful about it, because the question of the work has to do with the condition of the body, the skin, and the tattoo and all the other elements in the sacks that I've been dealing with. They were somehow buried beneath the floor. So the back side of this is actually where you would normally step on. But the underneath, no one ever sees it. And normally when they're cutting the trains into pieces, these are parts they remove and they throw away, they burn them. And I said, no, once we removed it, I was like, oh, the backside is so interesting and so beautiful. So I thought, okay, why not use that part as a starting point for this dialogue?
So you've talked before about it not being exactly a found object.
Yes.
Your materials aren't found objects.
No.
They're objects that you work for or that people work with.
Yes.
They're not found objects. They come it's a bit more complex than that.
Yeah, they're not found. You're not going to find a train or something like that. You don't find them. You go and you get them. Yeah, because you go and get them. For instance, 24 Tons of Silence, the 24 photographs. These are materials this is a train, literally, that was cut into pieces. And then I had to buy it from the scrap dealer. And then I had to find the cutter, the welder who would cut it into pieces, and pay him and rely on his memory to weld the entire train back together again in order for us to be able to produce the work of art, you know? So it's that thing that we are living in a generation where the idea is to reverse the process, because I always say that we are almost like archaeologists or time travelers to begin with. And then in the case of this drawing that we're sitting in front of, also the materials on the surface were archives which were abandoned from a factory that was built in the post-independent era. And they were going to burn down, destroy this factory and sell the land to some Chinese investors. And I went into the factory and I literally had to bribe the security men who were looking after these materials because we were going to burn them anyway, you know, and then to collect them. And I kept them in the studio for, I think, 7 or 8 years before we could even make. Mm-hmm. So I also like the idea of collecting materials and just taking time to reflect upon them. And also letting the scandal of the bribe disappear. And then I can come back to when no one is looking again, you know, forgotten about it. Yeah.
So let's go back to the idea of trains and your first site visit here. And we had made an invitation for you to come and look. And one of the things I do when any artist comes to the Fruitmarket is I say, we don't touch the ground. We're on columns over the railway. Let me take you down to platform 8 and show you how what the Fruitmarket is, and that it's over the railway, and it's a very specific part of what the Fruitmarket is. And we went on a nice walk around all the railway, and I've never seen an artist before light up quite so much as you. And we come back and we sit and we have lunch, and you go, do you know, I've got some things I've got some trains. There's something we could do here. And I think, all of the work here is made for here. Yes. There's a thing, it's not exactly, it's a very specific kind of site specificity, I feel. That's something that there is there's an interplay. We can hear the train just there. There's an interplay all the time between this work and our railway. And I don't know, I'd just like to hear you talk a little bit about that moment when you thought, what can I do? I can make something with these trains here.
Yeah, it was just instinctive, because I always like to produce work that has meaning to the context. Yeah. In the case of Tamale, the first time when I was interested in these railway things, when I was in boarding school as a child, the house that we lived in, it wasn't so far from the railway, and our boarding school was not far from the railway, the railway line, because there's one railway line that goes through the city to Insawam and other places where I got some of the trains from. And I promise you, as a child, I always heard the sound of the train, but I never saw a train until I first came to Europe. I never saw the trains in Ghana. I always heard the sound. From my childhood up until I was in my late 20s, I never saw the objects physically. Did you have a sense in your mind of what they might be? I didn't know how they would even look like, I only saw rail lines, and even the train tracks mostly were buried in the ground, so you could see the tip or forms of it, So it was one thing that I never really thought about it much until much later. I was like, indeed, I never really saw one, because when we were going to school, sometimes they block the line, so people would not park on the rail line, but I never really saw one. And I always heard it in the evening when we're in boarding school, when the train is going, but I never saw it. So also given the British and their relationship to the Gold Coast and the Commonwealth as to Scotland and other places, I thought, okay, why not? Because a lot of the infrastructure that we we have here in Scotland, as against in the Gold Coast. Some of them were built around the same period, you know. So I thought I'm trying as much as possible, because I had written a proposal to the Railway Ministry in Ghana about converting some of the old warehouses that the British had built for the repair of the trains and others into like cultural centers and others. And the proposal was rejected. So I thought, okay, why not? Maybe this could be another point of departure in terms of re-establishing this conversation. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, obviously, it's been great for us. I don't think anyone will ever really integrate the work into our particular situation again. But I wanted to look at the levels of reality there are in the work, the register of the real in the work. Maybe we could look at Ghana Man Papa again. Obviously, there are real materials. Yes. There are real. The register of the real is there in the invoices of the paint division of the GIHOC. There are the real materials, and then there's what you do on them. And I want to look at both these things, but starting with this one, can you tell us about the figurative, what it was to, because when I first got interested in your work, it didn't appear to be about figuration. Mm-hmm. And the register of the real was there in the materials, not so much in what you were doing on them. And can you talk a bit about what brought you to make figurative drawings on these real things? Because I think it took you a little while to actually draw on these invoices.
It took a while. I think the first encounters with them making work was with the bats, and then taking photos of the bats and making these collages.
Tell us a little bit about the bats, a little aside about the bats. What are the bats doing in there? What are bats doing in your work?
So the bats are from, there's a building in Ghana, there's a series of buildings, there are these silos. They are part of the Food Distribution Corporation, which Ghana likes to call them the former Food Distribution Corporation. They were built in the post-independence era in Ghana, mainly from the late 50s, early 60s. And they were built by our first president, Kwame Nkrumah, because in the post-independence era, Nkrumah, because of Pan-Africanism and everything, and also his relationship with the Eastern Bloc because of his Marxist and socialist background and tendencies, he always said that, in order for us to have real independence, we need true economic independence. So he worked a lot with the Soviet Union to build these massive concrete silos, which were supposed to be for the storage of like food products like cocoa, cashew, and all these other things. And 1966 came. In the 60s, of course, there was a Cuban Missile Crisis, there was the Cold War, and Nkrumah was overthrown, and all these projects were completely abandoned. So nothing worked ever since. Even there was an attempt to destroy his legacy by destroying a lot of the works that he did. And I bought one of these buildings in COVID, when the state was selling the land and the property. So I negotiated just to buy that particular building because of the history that it came with. It was very dark because people would tell their children, don't go to that building, because there was a propaganda from the CIA at the time that Nkrumah was building nuclear bunkers and there was going to be nuclear fallout because of the relationship with the Soviet Union. So the building was called Nkrumah Volini. And Volini means a dungeon or a prison, like a dark place. But in our language, the language is so complex, it could also mean a gift or a potential or something like that. So when I bought it and we started cleaning out the building, trying to see what was, because no one knew what this building was underneath because of the bunker and everything, we realized that there was a huge colony of bats living in the building and also ecosystems of birds, owls, some snakes, interesting. And also wild, like livestock, sheep, goats, they used to use it as a refuge and all that. And I said to myself, what do you do with a space like this, particularly in the midst of COVID, in the midst of the pandemic, when everyone is saying that, but the bats are giving us COVID. I said, no, we rather have to leave the bats in this space, because if you go back to, it's because we destroyed the landscape, because the urbanization had somehow taken away the forest and all the places that the bats would live. And that was the only place that ecosystem could exist. And we could not go back in time pretending that we're going to reclaim a building. So the idea was to leave them there. I didn't want it to become another colonial project. So I wanted to leave the bats in the building. So if we're using it as a cultural space, we would negotiate with the bats in terms of what we show, our use of lights, things like that. Because it's important that children, when they're using a space, they understand that it's not, human beings are not the only people on this planet. Yeah, sometimes birds live in a space, and then why? What's wrong with that? Yeah, so that's where the bats came from. And I
Now
thought
they
it was
carry the trains for you.
exactly.
Fantastic.
It was an important lesson, an ideological one, because the idea. That's why I made these drawings in Ljubljana. At the time I had a really bad malaria and COVID combined together, and I used to have these hallucinations sometimes when I took this pill, and then I imagined the bats carrying the trains, almost as if the bats were somehow exhuming, because there was the relationship. What's the relationship between the bats in the bunker of this building with its history, and aside the trains which are being cut into pieces. And these are the trains that were cut into pieces that were remodeled. So I was looking at this idea of excavation or exhumation and combining, let's say, the ecosystem of the bats and then saving them in a building and transforming it into a public space versus some trains which are from Germany, from Kassel, which was during the Nazi era, which was the heart of everything, and then it was bombed during like the raid. So the question was that how do you reconnect these histories and all that? And I thought that just the simple choice of using the drawing to somehow connect these things and mark making. And of course, the text on it, on the ledgers are already important, but I also thought that someone like caricature, who is the main figure in this work, is important because he's the single most important, arguably like the single most important character in our art history, because he's the one that somehow allowed us to see all these possible connections, the relationship between architecture and painting and sculpture, film, theory, all these things. He's the one that allowed for those theories to like reconnect all these different disciplines. And without him, a practice like mine would have never come to life.
It's interesting that you make an homage to him in drawing.
Yes.
Obviously, your whole practice is because of him, but it's interesting that in actually quite a traditional medium, you've ended up making an homage to him in a discipline we can all recognize.
It's interesting because he was an artist, like he's an artist, but he was a painter, a very good one. And then he stopped painting in order to teach theory and also to train artists. Yes, he said, I can't quite quote him, but he said, I had to stop making drawings in order to produce artists. Yeah. So it's funny that now that we became artists, we will make him into a drawing.
Very nice.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
So then if we take this idea of looking at the register of the real and we look at these, these are not figurative, but what you have there is basically the process of making these drawings is very much to do with the figure and to do with and you have the words on there for various, they stand in for people, both the people who made them and the people whose names they are. Can you tell us a little bit about how are these, because for me these are inhabited by people. Tell us about the relationship of figuration and people with these works.
The names, we had to go around the communities and also ask people, because a lot of names are also going extinct, like very traditional
People's
names. People's names. A lot of people who lived in like very rural areas would migrate to the cities. Most people would not go back to the village. So there were many villages that actually are quite erased now because everyone wants to go to, it's almost, when you live in a community where you produce a lot of food, but yet at the end of the year, you can't even get 15% of the food that you produce to feed the population because there are no road access to these areas. Currently, even in Ghana, we have this pandemic situation with like illegal gold mining with mercury in the water. So we almost have like 50% of water bodies destroyed. Okay. Cocoa farms and all other like farms are being destroyed. People rather prefer to like literally try to find gold in the ground than to be able to like grow food or something like that. So these have always been like growing over the last decades. And I thought it was quite interesting because most of the works that I made in the past, there was always this point of tattoo on the body, like the photographs downstairs. Yeah. And those tattoos represented the conditions of people migrating from the rural to the cosmopolitan. And in case of death, like in the case of my grandfather's days, they felt like if you died, it was a way to identify their bodies.
So is that's something you do before, your grandfather would have done before making this big journey to find work? It's identify yourself with your name and the name of the village? What do you...
Like it's a biodata. Sometimes it's just one name, sometimes the name of several relatives or things like that. And even, so you find it a lot with the market women in Ghana. And periodically, maybe they put other things like it could be a scorpion or or an emblem or something like that. And I thought it was quite interesting. So what we did was that we broadened it up. We took some of the old maps, and then we found communities that sometimes don't exist anymore, because in the early 60s, when we opened the hydroelectric dam, the water base expanded, and a lot of communities, I think at the time, they had to evacuate about 150 to 200,000 out of the 5 million population in Ghana, villages. Because the villages drowned, So a lot of those villages are still underground. Imagine maybe they were craft, things that were somehow buried within the lake. So we had to go back into that in order to be able to excavate that to make these tattoos. And the tattoos the mark making is also not ordinary. It's not as if we just write it. It's done with a very specific technique of using a needle on the body, and then they take the carbon from an old lantern, and then they mix it with kerosene and local herbs, and then they use that to make the tattoo. So it's very toxic. It's one that you call a toxic relationship between the body and then the technique itself. And I thought it was quite, from my point of view as an artist, because we're always thinking about weird gestures and things like that. I thought it was actually quite beautiful to produce.
So you're working with the people who make these tattoos that also have these tattoos.
Exactly.
There's a nice circularity there.
Exactly.
I want to talk to you a little bit about people and about labour. There are a lot, there are a lot of people behind those works. There's a lot of people behind everything you make. You're a very collaborative artist. Can you talk to us a little about labour in your work? What is it?
For me, intellectual labor specifically, because when people produce things, it also comes with a wealth of experience and also histories and all that, and that has always been very important to me. If I have an idea and I think that I can work with people in order to be able to produce that idea, it's far more important to me, because when they come to it, they come with their experiences, and then they also come with certain spontaneities in order to be able to produce that thing. Because I want to be able to see the work that I make, and I want it to surprise me in terms of its form, But at the same time, more importantly, I've also always thought that when an artist produces a work of art, it's not just their personal intellectual property or labor. It's a collective thing, because I like the idea that we're producing something, and a part of that thing can travel, and then a major part of it can stay within the environments that we find ourselves in. And then what travels, a part of it can convert itself into some kind of a capital, and then we can use that capital in order to be able to invest into building alternative infrastructures, and then that can house that. Because the question again was about the thing of what belongs to us. So because when artists produce works, the question is that, does the work stay in the studio, or does the work end up in a collector's house or in a museum somewhere? But I think that when we're able to create a system where the work belongs in the community, because honestly, sometimes people think that it's weird. They're like, why are we doing this? Because it's not normal for you to produce that. But I think the single role of the artist is to be able to provide that vision that allows us to be able to do the thing that seems very senseless and impossible traditionally. And then suddenly, when we're able to contextualize it within a collective environment where we can look at it and then reflect upon it and then discuss, for me, I think that's where the context of the labor becomes important. Because suddenly we can look at something that we're familiar with, that we're doing all the time, but we never really reflected upon it within that context. And for me, I think that's where we're able to begin to think and ask the questions that normally we wouldn't ask.
And is this why you document the work? So, there is a circularity in your work. A lot of the work's in there. There's the Polaroid work, where we see a lot of the work being made in the Polaroids. We see the situation. And then we have and this is a complete first for us here at Fruitmarket. And I think now every artist will be asked to do this, because it's such an extraordinary thing to do. The film that you've made in the little gallery which documents the making of the work,
Yeah.
which some artists, I think, and I think it's a hugely political gesture, maybe some artists might think that this is demystifying the work in some ways and making and undercutting the genius of the artist, because what you're showing is the work being made by lots of other people. And is that all part of this sense of honouring labour and making sure that the making of the work stays in the context?
Yeah, it is important, honestly. I've never thought of myself as a genius in any way. You know, as artists, the work that we want to make, it already exists out there in the world. As I said, we only provide a certain sense of vision for what we think that we need to focus on at any given point in time, and then we open up that point for all of us to be able to discuss collectively. Yeah, so certainly I want people to be able to see the process, and I want them to be able to question the process. Yeah, you know, so I have no sense of hiding anything. You know, I remember when we were in art school, we used to study about the kitsch, and also artist practices. I remember when we were at school sometime when some of our colleagues were making work, and then they saw you come in, they would hide their work. They were like, oh, I don't want you to steal my technique. And I was like, and do what with it, you know? You know, so, but then again, if you share it with other people, sometimes because you're so close to something, you don't see it very well. You need someone to be able to see it from a distance. I'm like, do you realize this? And that is what our community in Ghana, the art community, like with Gold Leaf and everyone, the idea is that we could begin to help one another. So even in the context of SCCA, one of the spaces in Tamale, we could dedicate it to retrospectives. So even Professor Caricature would encourage students to go to older artists, to visit them, and then to be able to write their thesis, undergrad thesis, on their works. Because then you could, even by interviewing them and talking to them, you could allow them to go back into their deepest memories and then excavate certain techniques and processes and all that. And it's good because all of us could learn from it or could share in it and all that. So certainly. Because
you're inviting, I mean, it does remind me of Glasgow at a certain point where artists are inviting older artists to come and show in transmission. There is a generosity. I remember when I was working in London and I was interested in an artist in Glasgow, and I said, can I come for a studio visit? The artist said, not until you make 3 other appointments. You don't come to my studio unless you come to 3 other people at the same as well. You don't just come and see me. Okay. And there was a generosity there that I really liked, and that was and something about the way you're showing other artists and building the careers of other people slightly reminds me of that you're not doing it by yourself.
Yeah, no, it's important. I work with all my colleagues in Ghana. Even at the space, our artistic director was my classmate in university. You know, one of the stories that motivated me also to build this, to create this practice, was some years ago. I went for an exhibition in Accra, and it was done at a very big automobile company, and there were paintings and sculptures. So after undergrad, I went to see these works. It was in the evening, and I saw one of the artists. He had also trained at the same KNUST. And he was very busy showing some wealthy people around the paintings because we're patrons, you know. And I didn't get a chance to talk to him. But I knew his studio was not so far away from where I lived. So, because when you're driving, you always see the studio. And then they're open sometimes. So I went there one afternoon to knock. Out of curiosity, I was very excited as a young artist, like I was 22. So I remember him opening the door just like halfway, and his foot was in the door. He said, "What do you want?" That's the first thing he asked. And I said, "Well, I'm a young artist. I really admire your work from afar, and I thought maybe I would come to your studio and see more." And he said, "Are you going to buy anything?" And I said, "No, I told you I'm a student." You know? And then he closed the door. Yeah, he didn't say anything. You know, and it left a really long-lasting impression on me. And I was like, I couldn't quite understand it for a long time. So when I had the chance to start building the studio, that was one of the things I wanted to quickly demystify. That the idea that the artist studio would be open, you know, what's the beauty of inviting school kids? I remember when we were building the rail lines in Tamale, we would invite the school kids to come, and then we would literally, the idea of the workshop was not for them to come and make anything, was for them to come and see the rebuilding of the line, or was for them to come and see us, the bricklayers, laying one brick on top of one another to build something. Because the point is about the legacy of the work that we're making. Because if you're making work, imagine in 50 years' time, we might not be here. There's going to be an entire generation that will inherit this wealth of work. What do they do with it? And what's the memory that they come to with these spaces? It's very important. It's not as if the thing fell out from space. At least they understand that there was a certain labor that went into it, and they witnessed it as a work in its form, something that they see all the time. And then if they ask a child, what do you want to be one day? No one ever says, I want to be a brickmaker, a layer. Everyone wants to be a lawyer or a doctor or something like that. But the idea was to demystify, for them to see the conditions in which things are being made. So at least when they're thinking about it, they think also about it from a dignified position, which is very important when we're thinking about that labor and its consequence.
I mean, there is that amazing point in the film, in the little gallery, when the children are looking at the archival material that we have in the vitrine over there. You don't expect to see I don't expect to see children so entranced by old photographs, and they're all really into it. There's a real excitement there, and of course, one of the things that the film does for us is it brings Ghana back to these works. You know, we've hung them here; they look very elegant. They're very much in the. We're not really a white cube. I don't think we quite so elevate ourselves as to think we are, but we have white walls. We try. But anyway, they look very clean and very elegant. And what the film does is bring Ghana to them. It brings Ghana in here and brings them back to Ghana. But I want to just end, before we go over to questions, to talk to you about this idea of bringing things back to Ghana, because we haven't talked about the warehouse, the steel room. But this was originally an idea, maybe we bring some railway tracks from Ghana to here. You know, they were made in Britain for British purposes, end up in Ghana. Maybe we bring them back, and then we decide not to do that. But tell us a little bit, talk a little bit about the warehouse and what your plans are for that work now.
Well, the original, finally when this idea settled, the idea was...
The warehouse is tough, no? It was exciting, but it takes a long time to work out what you'll do.
It took quite a while. I wasn't quite sure. But eventually when, of course, we settled on an idea, the idea was to bring the railway tracks from Ghana. But eventually, we didn't. And then we had to source the materials here, which I think even worked out more beautifully in that context. But the idea was also just to play with the forms, because the figures in it are of the union, the labor union from the railway, which was also very instrumental in Ghana's independence in the 50s. And I thought it was actually quite interesting just to be able to make this work, which was somehow in homage, because there's this film, the collage of films, which there is a young woman, Francine, from Manchester. When I did the show Parliament of Ghosts, we made this recording where I took certain sections of post-independent parliamentary debates in Ghana, where the one MP is talking about the idea of empowering the youth and to be able to create a world that allows young people to take a lot more responsibility, things like that. And when you were listening to it and looking at the figures, clearly the figures are all older people. Yeah, but certainly the point about it was about a point of responsibility.
And they were young once, you know. They were youth.
Yes,
those
exactly.
people.
Yes. I remember some years ago there was the Youth Association of Ghana. The president was 70 years old, you know. Yeah. So the question is about what decisions would young people make if they knew that they had 70 years ahead of them in the world. What decisions would they make? Yeah, would they make decisions that they would not live long enough to see the consequences of it? Yeah. So certainly, in regards to that work, we thought that maybe it would be quite interesting. There's a part of Godley's text where she writes a lot about Okwinwezo's work, particularly with the Johannesburg Biennial, and talking about the hosts and the guests. And it's very important, particularly with regards to this question of how we are building new types of institutions and things like that, about the question of the host and the guest, because in building, for instance, the art practices like building Tamale, red clay and all that, and the children coming in, witnessing the building of the institution, or using the parliament, or witnessing the parliament transforming, or witnessing the trains being built, or using them as classrooms and all that, or the objects. The question is that, again, when we are talking about the context of the guest and the host, how does it function within a space like this, where we are somehow establishing a whole new dialogue between materials and matter, which is in a state of decay, and then in a state of disappearance, versus young people who have an entire life ahead of them, who are somehow brought into this context. Like, what's the relationship that is established within that? I think that maybe we can leave the conversation at that point, and then, yeah. We can
So
think
you're
about
looking
it.
to break down the barrier between the guest and the host,
Yes.
to blur that a little.
Yes,
So
exactly.
it's not you hosting all these
Yes,
children.
yes.
These children are in some way hosting you, or
Yes,
they're bringing
exactly.
you into their ideas.
Exactly, because as I said, we're almost time travelers, because you almost have to imagine that you're coming from a distant future in order to be able to make a choice in the present. And then you also have to travel back in the past, because you can't build a future without looking back in time. But sometimes you also have to imagine that you are from a future in order to be able to make decisions that establishes a much better future. So sometimes I imagine that I am one of these children after all. You know, it's not just me. Imagine if you were one of these children that you had more life ahead of you. What would be your relationship to all these subjects? And also when they come there, the way they use space and the way they look, the way they question, it's different from us, because we're looking at the world from sometimes I'm very practical, I'm very pragmatic, but for them it's not about the pragmatism. There's a sense of play and openness about the world and promise. And that promise or gift is also a gift to us in how it allows us to be a lot more imaginative. Yeah.
That's lovely. I could talk to Ibrahim all night, obviously, but I shouldn't hog the conversation. Are there any questions in the room or online? I can see 3. Okay. Have we got a roving mic? Yes. Ruth, do you want to start with this lady? It wasn't a question.
I was just saying that I haven't quite worked out as a single question, but I'm really fascinated by the vertical and the horizontal plane, and I don't know if you could maybe clarify when you're making these pieces, particularly these on the wall over there with the names. I see them as on the floor and people moving around them and putting down names and the various materials. Is that right?
In the making?
In the making of them?
No. In the making, we worked with specific tattoo artists who made them. But in the hanging of it, of course, they're vertical. We had to hang them this way. But there is another version of this work in New York currently at the White Cube, which is like all these old hospital beds, and the work is somehow lying horizontal on the hospital beds in different fragments.
Made on the vertical?
Yes.
All right.
No, they were not made vertical. They were lying flat on the floor, and then we made them. Yes.
I just wondered what you thought about the transformation of the view from working on the floor. I used to work on the floor a lot, and the vertical hanging. Do you think that adds or subtracts, or is it something else? Or
no, in this context, it was just practical because of the fluidity of the material. If you make it, you can't make it on because of the ink and all the other things. It's better when it's on the floor because we sit on it, we stand on it, we walk on it, we make the thing, and then at the end of the day, we have to clean the entire work with kerosene. Also, at the end of the day, so it's just practical, but also because I wanted to look at it from a painting point of view. So at the end of the day, the idea was to hang it on a wall. But as I said, in New York, they are not on the wall. They are on these old hospital beds. So certainly the way you see them is very different from how they are shown here.
It was very interesting for us hanging them because we unpacked them downstairs and then bringing them upstairs. There was a moment when they stopped being a horizontal thing. They were being cradled by our technicians, and then they went up onto the wall. And there was an extraordinary transformation that happened from the horizontal to the vertical, which was very interesting. There was a very eager question in the gentleman with his hand up with the lovely hair and the glasses. Ruth, here. Yeah, there we go. Keep your hand up so Ruth can see you. In the middle there. There we go.
Okay.
And then there's a question behind after that.
Thank you, Fiona, and especially welcome to you, Ibrahim. This was the most sustainable exhibition that I've seen in 30 years in Edinburgh. As an ecologist, I was fascinated by your great efforts to retain the bats in suitable habitats, right down to considering the lighting. And I do this with new builds and conversions all the time. It's very challenging, and to have achieved that is testament to the sincerity of the intentions of your team. Also, the reclaiming of these materials is in itself a very sustainable practice, and it's a lesson to all those, like my daughter hopefully very soon, studying art in Edinburgh or Glasgow. But also the trades union angle that you brought in, which was, as you say, so instrumental in Kwame Nkrumah's rise, as in some Eastern European countries. The whole exhibition just breathes sustainability. And I'd like to hear your thoughts about how sustainability is being addressed more widely in the Ghanaian communities with which you've worked.
Well, a lot of these works that you see, they are also in Ghana. So for instance, when you come to the studio, one of the things that I've always done is that when I'm producing work, I'm always thinking about the context of the work in the local. The local is very important to me, you know, because first and foremost, if you're making work in the local environment, people have to be able to understand what you're producing and what it means. And yeah, we try our best because at the end of the day, as I say, we're making work. There is no point in making work that the people within the local community cannot understand it, because the intellectual labor comes from that place. Yeah, a lot of artists sometimes say that, oh yeah, but it's, especially from here, it might, I don't want to generalize, but then because there's access to resources, sometimes people, when you're coming from a place which is very precarious, you might think, oh yes, but I can't show the work there because we don't have access to the institutions to preserve the work and things like that. No, for me, it's very important to be able to make work that can survive within the context of the space that you can make the work in. Because I like the idea that I could just take one of these works in Ghana and take it to a village somewhere and say, oh, we're doing a workshop. Or, yeah, because you know that you've collected a work from these same places. And then in showing them in those places, you're not really thinking about damage. Even when there is damage on it, you can repair it. Because after all, it's the question of repair which has led us into the idea of making art in the first place. Yes, so certainly. It's
so lovely. I like that as a nice idea. There was a question behind,
back,
I think,
yes.
In the back.
Anola.
Nah, he's speaking our local language.
I'm gathering.
I'm really excited as Idagomba to be sitting down here and listening to your emotional yet relatable story.
Yes.
Haven't read your biography and watched a lot about you. Everything about you is great except the fact that you attended the wrong university, that's KUST.
Yes.
I'm a product of Legon.
Okay.
As an academic and a professional who's worked with children all my life, I can relate to your work. But I've got 3 questions. First, what become of the children and young people beyond your studio, those who are involved in your project? What become of them beyond that? Second is the burden of funding. How do you cope? And finally, the legacy. I'm very much aware of the tradition and customs and how we belittle the art industry in Dagbang. How do you aim to preserve the legacy of what you do?
Yeah, so I will try to remember all the questions.
3 questions.
Yes.
I've got them.
Yeah, but I think, maybe I'll start from the bottom. Yeah, it's the question of legacy. I guess the point is that the first thing, honestly, when I think about the work that I do, it's more or less about the possibility of the work. Because you have to imagine if you're coming from a place where it's difficult to get access to certain forms, I'm not thinking so much about what it becomes necessarily tomorrow. I'm thinking about what it proves that there is possible. That idea that, yes, indeed, we were able to make this. And that other people, particularly young people, can see that, indeed, yes, it's possible to do this. And then we can replicate, or we can build upon it, or we can preserve going forward. So certainly we train a lot of young people, and the idea is that we need more people who take up an interest in these things in order to be able to carry the work that we do forward. And secondly, the funding issue, most of the work that we do, it comes from the work itself. So for instance, I have 2 galleries that I work with, one in London and one in Italy, in Brescia, White Cube and a Palazzo. And when each time they sell a work of mine, that goes into something. So when a drawing is sold, maybe it will go into buying of an old train, or preserving a building, or doing a workshop, or things like that. So certainly I've relied on my own work, but it was very necessary also, because the idea was to start with the contradiction of art in itself, with the surplus capital. Because the reason why the global south, we have a lot of the problems that we are dealing with, has been about the question of capital and the surplus capitalism and the surplus capital. So the question is that, can the surplus capital do something a lot more than what the NGO proposes, or the idea of aid, or things like that? So I wanted to prove that as a point. So that's why I spent all these years clearly working slowly, making a drawing of a building. It will sell to a museum, using that work to propose saving the building. So there are, sometimes it seems absurd, and it seems very absurd, but it's necessary in order to be able to open up that field. And the first question was?
First question was, what becomes of the kids? Yeah.
The kids become of adults one day. And they will, I believe that certainly it's about proposing new ways of looking at the world. An example is that we do these drone workshops in Tamale. And when we started, the idea was that it seemed quite absurd, like, why would you be teaching the kids here a drone? Because in this community, we barely have access to drinking water. Like, I've spent so much money building the institution, but we can't even get the state to provide drinking water. So it means that here, when someone wants to go on a protest or something, when they go back home, the infrastructure will still be waiting for them. You still have your food, you still have water, electricity, but back home it's not the same thing. You'll barely even get a road to go back home if you don't break your leg in a pothole, you know? So that was the thing about the work, that we are building spaces or working with children in order for them to be able to have a different sense of courage. You know, the question is about courage, because sometimes we can produce something, but we won't do it. We can take a step or decision, but we won't do it. So the question was about building a space that could allow for the excavation or exhumation of courage from a much younger population. Because I believe that in 20 years, when some of these kids become, let's say, one of them becomes the Minister of Culture or an MP or something like that, we're not now going to argue about the significance of art within the community or within the environment. Because I remember sometimes when I discussed it, be like, but what's so important about building an arts institution? Why can't we invest the money into a business or something like that? But you need a younger generation that can understand that. And the work that we do is just a seed, because that seed will lay something new or birth something new within them. So at least they can be a little more sensitive in the future. They don't need to be artists necessarily, but the fact that they'll be sensitive adults and practitioners, even when they are doctors or lawyers or engineers, at least their sensitivity to the world and the conditions around them is important. Most people are not sensitive about the world that they live in. They grow up, they have a profession, and things are working out, and they're like, oh yes, indeed, it's working out. And then it's not working out for other people, yes, that's their problem. But to understand that the entire world is interconnected, and the more that artists work with these contradictions and open up all these different points, it allows us to see all the different possibilities within the world. So certainly, I think that is one of the things. It's something we hope for. Of course, we cannot predict time, but it's better to invest into hope than to produce in despair. Yeah.
And that is why we do it.
Yes.
And that is what it's all for.
Yeah.
I think
There
We're
was
going
a question.
to draw it to an end because we have because we're late. Please ask the question downstairs. Yeah, that is why we do it. I wish we could just bottle that and
Yes.
send it to every politician and every whatever. It's
Yeah.
absolutely extraordinary. I will thank Ibrahim in a minute. First of all, I want to thank you all for listening and for coming along. I am about to spirit Ibrahim downstairs, down the back stairs, to sign books downstairs. Please do consider, if you can, buying the book. Here we go. It's £25 during the exhibition, and the exhibition ends tomorrow. So the price goes up tomorrow. I say the exhibition ends tomorrow. Please do come back if you can and say goodbye to this extraordinary show. I know we'll all be here crying, probably, and we're going to miss it so much. I have to say this, I'm really sorry. I have to say two things. I'm really sorry for both of them. We are a charity. If you feel like you can support us, we are publicly underfunded by the Scottish Government, as you all know. If you feel you can support us by buying the book, by giving us a donation, there are colleagues with a tapping point, so you can give us a donation on the way out. If you can't do that, as I say, do come back tomorrow and read the book in the space where you can do that for free. Also, we'll be emailing you for feedback after the event. What are we, Amazon or something? I don't know. But we are going to be doing that. I'm really sorry. But please support us by giving feedback, positive and negative. If it doesn't work, we'll never do it again. But we thought we'd give it a shot. So let us know what you thought about the event. Help us get better, please. Yes. But mostly, thank you for coming. Thank you for helping us celebrate, really, the extraordinary privilege of having this work here and the extraordinary privilege of being able to learn from you. I have learned so much about what art is for and how to run an organisation and how to inspire people. Thank you for that. Thank you for the show. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.